So next up in our presentations, we have Yale University. Yale is a top Ivy League research university in the USA and amongst the most prestigious in the world. Yale is most renowned for law and finance, but they also have a very unique arts program, and we're looking forward to learning all about it. This presentation will be translated for all of you by one of our instructors, Ava. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat or wait for the presentation to end so you can ask your question. Let's welcome Keith Light from Yale.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. As Hannah said, my name is Keith Light, like a light bulb. When I'm traveling the world and popping in at immigration, I always get a smile or a laugh from the immigration officers, and they let me through. But that is my real name. And by the way, Yale's motto is light and truth. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that Yale has borrowed my name for its motto. Let me say from the beginning that some of you may have heard of Yale before or know a little bit about it. Some of you may have never heard of Yale and know nothing about it. And what I plan to do is introduce you to the university as best I can. And let me say at the outset that I've seen the excellent schools that have been part of University Week at the Academy. And unless I'm mistaken, Yale is a little bit different in structure and nature than most of them. And in fact, if in my first remarks you get the sense, well, this isn't what I think I may be interested in for undergraduate studies, it won't hurt my feelings if you sign off or investigate later. But I wanted to point out that Yale most certainly has a School of Art. In fact, it's the oldest university school of art in the United States. There's a long history of visual and performing arts at Yale, and we have many students who are at Yale either studying in a program in visual arts or drama or music or graphic design. We have a major called computing in the arts. But it's for undergraduates, it's all part of an undergraduate degree experience that includes breadth and depth, of which students who decide to major in art, that will be their area of concentration, but they will include other academic disciplines to, I would argue, and we may talk more about this, inform art, that students who study history and science and mathematics and music, it may actually advance their art, just as students who are studying engineering as their major field of study at Yale or Princeton or Harvard, for instance, will also be asked to take courses in literature or fine arts or other areas, not just for variety's sake, but the idea of the informed mind includes all these different areas. So it's a practical reason, and you've probably heard the expression liberal arts. Even Americans tend to be confused by that notion, and we didn't invent it. But that is the nature of places like Yale and Harvard and Princeton and Columbia and Stanford. By the way, I mentioned those places not at random. They are American universities that are also well known And they have the same general approach to higher education as the one I very briefly described at Yale. I also can say that while I've been at Yale for a decade now as an admissions officer, I've also been an admissions officer at Stanford and Harvard and Princeton and Brown, and there might have been one more. I'm old, so I've had the experience of and the privilege of being an advisor and admissions officer at a number of places. And the reason I mention that is not that my background is so significant, but much of what I might say about the Yale experience would be similar to those other famous schools. Ivy League is the nickname for that crowd. Even though each school has its own particular strengths and particular personalities. Stanford is brand new by American standards, opened in 1891. Yale is coming up on 320 years old, so we're trying to get it right, and we've had some practice. So before I go and introduce the university, and then we'll come around to some of the arts programs in particular, I want to say again that, or be specific about one point, that undergraduates at Yale will have the full undergraduate program in which their area of concentration may be art. I should also add that there are students who come to Yale and major in biology and hope to be doctors, but they love visual or lively arts and are welcome to take the courses in those different areas. So we have many students who arrive at Yale, very talented artists, in fact, who don't intend to concentrate in art in particular, but it's like a banquet room full of opportunities to take courses in art, exhibit their pieces, design for various programs and things, do internships, even if their career interests may be very different. So one more time, if already you've decided Yale may not be the kind of institution you were thinking of, compared to, say, Rhode Island School of Design or SCAD or Cooper Union and so on, it won't hurt my feelings if you leave now. But stick with me if you find it to be interesting. By the way, speaking of schools like Yale, Brown University is literally across the street from the Rhode Island School of Design, RISD as we call it. And students at Brown can take courses at RISD, and students at RISD can take courses at Brown. And I don't know if it still exists, but there's also a dual degree program between the two. So just more evidence that there are opportunities for very serious, devoted and talented artists, even if it's not an art institute conservatory that you're thinking about. So for the next few minutes, let me tell you a little bit more about Yale.
Sorry, I'm Eva. I'm the translate for you.
Oh, hi, Eva.
Seminar. Do you mind giving me a few minutes?
For a minute? Shall I pause?
Yeah, try pause you a bit.
All right,
give me a few minutes. I will wrap up what you just said and
okay.
we can continue. Thank you.
Go ahead, Eva, and I'll hold on.
Thank you. Sorry for interrupting you.
Not at all. No, I'm glad you did.
大家好，我是 Eva。那刚刚招生官 Light 他有跟我们大概的讲述说，耶鲁大学的艺术专业其实是在美国相对来说最古老的一个艺术专业之一。那么在这个学校的话呢，对于本科的学生来说，所有的其他专业的本科学生，他们都可以按照自己的心愿去选择所有的本科的艺术的课程。另外包括他们也会有 机会去做设计类的东西。比方说，如果是这个学生本身是一个生物专业，但是他对设计非常感兴趣，那么在耶鲁大学，他同样会有非常好的机会去修这些课程，甚至包括一些实习机会，都是有的。这个是耶鲁大学非常好的一个地方。那么这位招生官本身呢，他也是之前斯坦福、哈佛或者是布朗、普林斯顿这样的藤校的招生官，所以刚刚他也有提到过，像那个布朗大学跟罗德岛大学其实就是一墙之隔。那么布朗大学跟罗德岛大学的学生其实是可以互相交换学校，然后修对方学校的一些课程。这个是大概这个招生官刚刚说的一些主要内容啊。Thank you, Keith. Please continue.
Thank you, Eva. And don't hesitate to raise your hand if I've lost myself and gone on too long.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Here's again, I'll be relatively brief about some of the characteristics of Yale and places like this. We're always happy to have students find the place where they'll thrive. Not necessarily, it's not in my interest to make sure that everybody falls in love with Yale. I have, even as a Stanford graduate, I am in love with Yale and other places, but it's the excitement of learning and doing things in a collaborative way with other students with energy. And by the way, I'm giving some hints about the admissions process right now. And I'll say right now, because compared to most world universities, at Yale and Harvard and Northwestern, you don't apply to a specific program, a specific major. You may have a specific major in mind. Yale offers more than 80 different majors, including art and architecture and computing and the arts and urban planning and so on and so forth. But you apply to Yale University and you may tell us about your interests. You might even send a portfolio of your work. But again, it's the depth and breadth of the experience that it characterizes these places. But one thing I can say about the most famous and well-known and the universities that have arguably the largest world reach share some things in common, and one is just plain resources. This is the main library at Yale, but we need about 24 libraries to hold the 16 million books. This is the entryway to that library. And even if you don't take anything out from the stacks or look at the digital collections, you'll leave smarter just by walking into the building. This building, you all probably know more about art and design than I do. I think the outside of the Beinecke Rare Books Library isn't all that attractive, but the walking inside is a wonderful experience because of the amber light that protects the rare books and manuscripts. It's one of the largest repositories of rare books in the world. I'll just say a few more words about some of the resources at Yale and places like it, Eva, and then I'll pause. Yale has about 1,200 laboratories for science and engineering. We spend about $1 billion every few years just to make sure that the resources for students to use are state of the art in every way. And when I say resources, I'm talking about every kind of resource, even the school of the environment where students can study environmental science and sustainability and so on, is built to be a model of a sustainable building. If you're interested in Jurassic Park or archaeology, sociology, anthropology. You can visit our Peabody Museum, which has a collection. This is just a small part of the 500,000 fossils and examples that archaeologists have found. And we'll get to art later, but Yale is famous for its art collection and its art instruction, but we'll come back to that a little bit later. Here's some of the sculptures that are part of the Yale collection. So I'm going to stop there, Eva, but my emphasis was on the fact that places like Yale and University of Pennsylvania and Harvard are extraordinary for the depth of their teaching and learning resources. And I haven't even talked about green spaces and Yale's farm and extracurricular opportunities and venues and performance halls and so on. But I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Please give me a few minutes. 刚刚招生官他主要是在说几件事情。第一个呢，就是说，耶鲁大学的申请是学生他不会针对某一个专业进行申请，它是一个 general 的一个，应该说什么，就是一个普遍性的一个申请。那么当然你在申请的时候可以告诉学校你的兴趣在哪个方面，甚至你可以提供你比较有自信的这个作品集作为申请的一个部分。那么刚刚招生官他给我们一个大概的一个介绍，这个整个耶鲁大学这些老牌的美国的顶级大学，它其实很不一样的地方就是它的一个给学生提供的一个研究学习的平台的一个深度跟一个宽度，甚至包括了它刚刚这个presentation 里面的这个主图书馆，它就有1600万册的藏书，甚至包括了一些非常少见的需要用特殊的处理去保护的那一些就是珍藏级的书。这个是在很多大学其实是没有办法做到像耶鲁大学这样的有一个底蕴。另外的话呢，刚刚那个招生官有开一句玩笑，就是那个大的主的图书馆，它那个走廊特别深、特别高、特别长，光在里面走一圈都会觉得让自己聪明很多，这也是挺好玩的。另外的话，耶鲁大学它一年就会花费10亿美金在给学生各种做研究科研的这个经费，所以刚刚这个招生官也在强调说，像耶鲁、像宾大、像哈佛这样的学校，其实它能够给学生的是一个深入其中的一个沉浸式的一个生活的一个氛围跟学习的氛围，包括他们非常有名的艺术的收藏品以及整个这个环境都是非常少见，也是非常非常棒的Yes, Keith, thank you.
Thanks. You take very good notes, Eva.
Yes.
One thing that is important to say about Yale and a few places like this is that it may be somewhat larger than some of the specific art schools and conservatories. As universities go, it's relatively small, even given or especially given all of the resources that we have. Yale has about 6,000 undergraduate students. And we also have a law school and a school of business and medicine and public health and divinity and environment, as I indicated earlier on. But we keep the undergraduate population relatively small so that the courses, the classes themselves can be smaller. And we do that because not only do we want students to be able to have direct contact with our very distinguished faculty in every area. Yale has a large faculty, and they are drawn to the great libraries and observatories and laboratories in the world and to each other. It's not unusual for Yale students to have courses taught by a Nobel Prize winner, a Pulitzer Prize winner, or young up-and-coming faculty. But Yale students, like Harvard students, also learn from each other. We want students who have imagination and curiosity and good preparation. In fact, that's why the admissions office is one where we consider context and your energy and interests, what your teachers say about you, not just what your grades at school might be. And here are some examples of students actually doing work and learning and trading ideas, not just listening obediently to the professor speaking. In the upper left, it's our School of Engineering, Innovation, and Design. It's a workshop where students build things and create things and come up with entrepreneurial ideas under the guidance of Yale faculty and others. In the upper right, it's a class that's taught in the Yale art galleries. You don't just look at books, you can go see some amazing pieces of art, and you'll see some more as we go along. So it's a characteristic of a place like ours where the learning is very active. We want students to engage. It doesn't mean that you have to be loud and an extrovert, but the learning it's a great mixture, a chemistry of students who are bright and curious and have their own ideas, and the faculty love exchanging ideas, even mentoring students. So the idea is to make the entire experience one that can be life changing, not because we insist that's the case. The university is challenging, but we want it to feel purposeful, and even in a complicated world, have students feel that they're well prepared to face challenges and be happy as they go. By the way, at universities like Yale, it's not just about classes and lectures and laboratories and working on art projects. We have a long parade of speakers and performances, hip hop artists and diplomats and scientists and poets, actors. When we ask Meryl Streep or Edward Norton to come back to talk about their careers, they always say yes, because that's where they studied at Yale. You see that there are even some organs and places to perform. This is simply a lecture, but Yale's collection of opportunities for students to participate. There are more than 150 Steinway pianos as part of the collection at Yale. So again, that has to do with resources and so on. And before I talk about residences, I'll pause again for Eva, but emphasize in terms of the curriculum that undergraduates spend 4 years at Yale. I want to emphasize again that you don't apply to a particular program, but you have time after you arrive to take classes, to talk with faculty, to meet deans and other students and say, should I study graphic arts or should I study art history with lots of courses in visual arts? Can I study psychology, but take as many art courses as I want? Or shall I aim to major in art, but because I'm interested in psychology and the connection between psychology and art? What are the different paths I can take? We think this makes sense, not because students are indecisive, but it's a process, not an event, to decide what your path through university will be. And you'll see that it's very interdisciplinary. Eva, I'm going to stop.
Okay, thank you. 刚刚那个招生官他有讲几个重点，第一个呢就是说，在耶鲁大学它的这一个underground 本科呢，其实招生不多，他们是想要保留一个相对来说一个师生比例比较小的一样比例，这样子的话，学生有更多的机会可以跟教授们，可以跟 faculty 去做更深入的一些学术的学习跟探讨，这个是非常不一样的地方。像招生官他有在说，他说像耶鲁也好像哈佛也好这样子的顶级学校，学生在大学里面不是只是去上个课，然后去写个作业就完了，不是的，更多的学校更希望学生能够去非常主动的学习，非常的去参与整个这个学术，包括这个思想的碰撞的所有的这样一个过程，那这也是为什么它的师生比例相对比较小，那么这样子的话，它faculty可以有更多的时间，就是教授会有更多的时间可以照顾到每一位学生，那另外的话呢，就是说，除了上课学习，那么在耶鲁这样顶级的学校呢，学生也会有很多机会可以聆听到每行每业的顶尖的人物的一些分享和一些交流。那么这些顶尖人物为什么耶鲁可以请得动呢？是因为他们也是耶鲁的校友，对，这也是招生官一直在强调的一件事情，就是 resources， 就是这一个资源跟平台。那么对于 curriculum， 对于这个课程的设置跟安排呢，耶鲁大学是这样的，招生官再次强调，当你在申请本科大学的时候，并不会限于我必须要申请什么专业，而且它是一个更加广泛性的一个申请。当你进入耶鲁大学之后，学校会希望你花时间去上不同你感兴趣的课，去跟不同的师长们去做沟通，去尝试，然后再来定你之后想要去一个什么样的一个专业。比方说，这个学生他自己本身对心理很感兴趣，但是他可不可以同时多修一些艺术课程呢？可以的。那么这一个学生他本身就是想说，有没有可能以后我就主修艺术呢？也可以的。那么有没有那学生想说，那我艺术也感兴趣，这一个心理我也很感兴趣，我想把这两者结合，那是否也有可能呢？在这4年的本科学习里面也是可以的。这一个方面的话，学校会大力的支持学生，也是非常鼓励学生去做这样子的一个探索，来决定你之后的专业，你之后的这个路要怎么走。OK，Thank you, Keith.
Okay, yeah. Well, one thing about Yale, and again, it's true of some of the other universities I've mentioned, is that the experience is meant to be residential as well, and by that I mean that our dormitories are not just meant to be accommodation or a place to sleep and eat, but an important part of the overall experience. And I say that because we want students to have advising based in the residence halls, in the courtyards, in the head of the college office or living room even, because to get the most out of the university experience, the smartest students are the ones who are eager to ask questions. How do I do this? How can I do a special project? Can I do combine different areas, as I indicated before, or just seek general advice and help? In one way, we've done this, and we've patterned it after the British universities. In fact, every morning when I come to work, I think I've arrived at Hogwarts, because Yale's buildings look very much like places where Harry Potter and Hermione would feel very comfortable. But there are 14 what we call residential colleges at Yale. And they're basically units of suites of students' rooms, each college has its own dining hall and library and music room and secret passageways and so on. So it's meant to feel like home for the students at Yale who come from around the world, and be able to go down the hall, have a meal with friends in the dining halls, talk about classwork, excuse me, and meet with the faculty who don't, many of them don't live in the residential college, but there's a head of a college and a dean, and other faculty members, including artists who are part of the college community, who are there to provide advice, give talks. We have regular, what we call college teas, the drinking tea. So whether tea is served or not, when we invite speakers to come talk about their work or their expertise, whether they're part of the university or not, it's an informal opportunity for students to have conversations with people who are outstanding in their fields. But the colleges are students' homes for 4 years. They'll have friends in the other colleges, but it's nice to have a smaller unit within the larger university, as I say, to call home and to find advice. Here's a magnificent place at Yale. It's Woolsey Hall. This is the Yale Symphony Orchestra performing. There are other ceremonies and projects and concerts in this hall. I mentioned once to an applicant several years ago that, well, not to the student in particular, but I mentioned that Yale is a place where you should ask if you can do things. Yale likes to say yes. So does Harvard and Stanford and Berkeley. And I just mentioned that student can say, may I play this magnificent pipe organ? And it turns out that he applied to Yale, was admitted, and he invited me to a concert he was giving where he came from the United Kingdom and asked if he could play, and he got lessons to perform in this famous organ at Yale. We have drama and dance. We have cultural groups, journalism, filmmaking, even students who don't like American football or ice hockey. Well, I would imagine that ice hockey would be a favorite where you are, but even if you're in Canada and don't like ice hockey, you may cheer for our teams and feel some of the Yale spirit. I mentioned extracurriculars because they tend to be an important part of the fabric at American universities. It's also more true in Canadian universities as well. The idea that relaxation and play and pursuing other interests can be a part of the learning as well as a way to relax and find new passions. I'm getting near the end of the introduction to Yale in particular. This is a snapshot of New Haven, which is where Yale is located. We're about 90 minutes or so by train from New York City. In fact, last week I hopped on a train in New Haven, saw a Broadway production of something called American Utopia, led by the Talking Heads leader. It was magnificent. If I had more time, I might have gone to the museum of or the Modern Museum of Arts in New York. As you know, there's lots of art and performance and food in New York City, but it's nice to be able to leave New Haven and be back later that day if you'd like, and not necessarily have to spend more time in New York City. In other words, it's close enough to take advantage of its presence nearby. We're also not very far from Boston, Massachusetts, and other parts in the East Coast of United States. New Haven itself is a medium-sized city. This is more of the look of New Haven here. Sorry, I'm back and forth from the slides. It's not a major city, but it's a medium-sized, very diverse city where we don't have skyscrapers casting shadows over the campus, but as I say, we're close to other places, both urban and rural. I'm not going to say anything right now about admissions or financial aid, other than to say Yale is incredibly generous with financial aid. Like other Ivy League schools, all our financial aid is based on need, which doesn't mean you have to be poor. But we admit students based on their talents and their promise for being an active part of the Yale community, not based on whether or not they can afford the high cost. In fact, most students can't. So Yale is fortunate to have the resources and the philosophical commitment to say, if you apply, we wish to admit you, we'll make sure that you can afford it. Even families who are earning well over $100,000 US, and whatever that is in Canadian dollars and loonies, we will make up the difference as a gift of financial aid, the difference between the cost of attending, including books and paint materials and everything else, transportation to the west coast of Canada, anything you need. We make up the difference between the cost and what's realistic for your families to afford. We're also, by the way, it doesn't matter what your citizenship is. So I won't say anything more about that. You shouldn't apply to Yale because we're generous with financial aid, but you shouldn't avoid applying to Yale if the combination of characteristics is interesting to you. You shouldn't avoid applying because it's expensive, and it is, except that we will make it work. There are many students who are paying nothing to attend Yale. And that the financial aid, by the way, is available throughout your time at Yale. Let me say one more thing before I turn it back to Eva. And that is that my understanding is that most of you would be interested in undergraduate studies at Yale, but we do offer professional degrees in a number of areas and master's programs in art and architecture and law and medicine and business and so on. So we're not just an undergraduate institution. And while the undergraduates are studying for an undergraduate degree, the fact that these Yale's famous School of Art and School of Drama, world famous, are part of the Yale constellation is a great advantage to Yale undergraduates who can take courses in these professional schools and graduate programs. So in a minute, I'm going to say a little bit more about art, but Eva, you might want to just translate a little.
Yes, I'll try.
Okay.
Thank you. 所以刚刚招生官主要是在跟大家介绍，这个耶鲁的一个，其实是学习之外的一个生活的一个情况。它重点就是说，residence 这个住宿呢，其实它更多的是像一个大学校里面的一个小的一个集体。那么他们这个集体不是只是吃睡，最重要的是它能够让学生觉得非常舒服，像在学习像在家里一样。同时，他可以在很晚的时候，他突然有一个想法说，哎，我可不可以做这一个尝试？我可不可以做另外一个事情？马上可以得到在宿舍里面就马上可以得到帮助。这个是一个非常好的一个氛围。那么完了之后呢，整个这个宿舍它除了有这个学生的住宿，有吃的地方，然后他们甚至还有一个 secret passageway， 就是那个一个大家的一个秘密基地吧。也是挺有趣的。包括如果你感兴趣音乐的话，音乐室随处可见，包括图书馆啊，这一些都是的。这是一个。然后另外一个呢，招生官他有再次在强调这个学生，学校希望看到学生的是，他希望学生能够主动的去问，去 去实现他们想要做的事情。那么招生官的原话是说，只要学生问，耶鲁大学包括哈佛大学都非常的想答应这位学生的请求，包括刚刚招生官有说，他有学生，自己本身是非常好的这个演绎者，那么也在问学校说，我们可不可以举办一个表演啊，那也是非常好的，甚至招生官都有被邀请去看，这是一个部分。那么第二个部分呢，就是说，为什么还是要强调课外活动呢？是因为说课外活动也毕竟是大学生活的一个部分。另外的话，招生官也有在介绍，New Haven 就是耶鲁大学所在的这个城市。这个城市不大，只是一个中型城市，但是呢，它离几个大的东部的城市非常近，就包括招生官自己本人，他可以在当天90分钟坐火车，从 New Haven 去到纽约去看百老汇的秀，然后当晚就能够回来。包括去波士顿也是非常近的。这个是学生生活的一部分的介绍。另外的话呢，关于这一个申请的话呢，不知道大家有没有看到，耶鲁大学它是100%的奖学金制度，就是它不需要你借钱，他也招生官也在强调说，他说学校录取学生是完全看重的是学生的这个才能，他不会去注重这个学生的经济能力是否能够承受。但是呢，他也说了，不要因为耶鲁给很多钱，然后再去申请这个学校，而是说你不要因为自己可能没有办法去完全提供这一个学费而不去申请耶鲁，而失去进入耶鲁的机会，大概是这个意思。Keith, thank you. Can you please continue?
Okay, thanks, Eva. Well, so now I'm just going to show you a few pictures of what's happening in terms of visual art at Yale. This is the not brand new, newly renovated School of Art and Galleries at Yale. As I say, it's very important at Yale. Yale tries not to have any program that isn't world class. That's just the aspiration. So no matter what you study or what you want to do, we think it's at the highest level. But again, Yale is well known for its art galleries and its art instruction. In fact, I mentioned that Yale's art school is the oldest in the United States, and one of the artists who shaped the approach to teaching art at Yale may not be a familiar name, but Joseph Albers was at Yale for a long time, who shaped the way we teach. Here's the building that's especially set aside for just sculpting. The spaces for creating art and learning about it are pretty extensive. Here's a example inside the renovated art gallery. This is just one of the small sections in the gallery. So even if you're not interested in art, it's just wonderful to walk through the Yale galleries and museums. We have more modern pieces of the art school and architecture and so on, libraries and places for lectures and study and to spend time with faculty and others. Again, this is both a place to just enjoy and it's part of the collections. Yale University has the largest collection of British art outside the United Kingdom. So some of the pieces in the gallery are extensive and famous. So like I say, this you all are thinking about, I'm sure, creating your own art, but part of the inspiration is both modern and classic arts, and Yale has plenty to offer in that way. Collection of cultural arts as well, sections in African art and old masters, and as I say, modern art, of course, as well. Also graphic design and urban design. The studio spaces are extensive, not only for students who are majoring in art, but those, as I said earlier, who are taking courses or want to use this space to do their work. This isn't an individual studio, but it's part of the teaching classroom, in a place where students learn, talk from faculty members, and think about their own work. So you can see, I don't need to tell you all that art is a creative process, not an event. And space and materials is what's important to have. Whether you're sculpting or painting or doing lithographs, whatever, you all again know much more about this than I do. I'm an appreciator rather than a practitioner, but we provide the space and not only classes, but the individual mentoring as well, for both students who are majoring in the subject and those who are simply taking courses. Yale offers more than 60 different studio art classes for undergraduates. Students, by the way, at Yale take usually 4 or 5 courses of any kind each semester, 2 semesters a year, for 4 years. So with 60 courses in of all kinds of art and design, you can see that the offerings are pretty extensive. So that's the glimpse of some of the art and the art spaces. What I'll tell you is that students who decide that they want to major in art can, right from the beginning, take courses among those 60 I mentioned, but also take courses in history and literature and music and economics, other areas that are interesting to them, and part of that balanced diet of coursework. At Yale, we don't tell you which courses you must take, but we say that a well-educated person must have those different areas of study. It's like going to a favorite restaurant and having not just the main menu, your major field, say, but also some vegetables and some starch and some bread and even some dessert. And you put together your own curriculum. Within art or within engineering, within one of those other fields, the faculty will design the kinds of courses you must include. And at Yale, like I say, art students may, whatever their intended focus might be, whether it's photography or print or painting, drawing, and so on, there are some fundamental aspects, and I'm sure you've experienced that at the academy, but then you can specialize as you will. And Yale School of Art, I want to emphasize, is both a professional school and graduate school for Masters of Fine Arts and doctoral programs. But while undergraduates don't apply directly to the School of Art, it is planted right there as part of the university, and students may take courses and then become part of the School of Art, major in art, if they show the commitment to that field. And the same for architecture, computing, and the arts, which unites, as the name implies, the use of technology in creating and presenting art. And so I'm going to generally stop there and say, and just so it's perfectly clear, that students who are interested in Yale, even committed art students, apply to the university, My colleagues and I make decisions, but we have the help of the art departments or music department for that matter. Students who are interested, as you all surely would be, in art, whether as a major or as continuing your passion, might decide to submit a portfolio that we will ask our art faculty to look at and give us guidance, and they will tell us, the admission staff, about the quality and depth, the commitment of your work, and we take that into account when we're making admissions decisions. It's later on, if you are admitted and decide to attend Yale, that you get to know the art faculty more, and then based on your work in your first 2 years, become part of the art major. Now, I could spend 4 hours not even covering everything about Yale University, but I wanted to stop there to let Eva finish that part of things and then invite you to ask whatever questions you may have. And if I don't know the answer, I'll try and find it for you.
Okay, thank you, Keith. 所以这一个阶段呢，招生官主要是在说耶鲁的这一个艺术的学校。那么首先第一个招生官非常骄傲的说，耶鲁是致力于向所有的学生提供世界级顶级的这样子的一个质量的一个课程跟学习。那么包括艺术也是一样的，他们有非常大量的艺术作品的收藏，他们有很多展览，就算是不是学艺术的孩子的或者是人都欢迎去看去享受，包括耶鲁大学是除了UK 除了那个英国之外的最大的一个收藏英国的一些艺术作品的一个地方，这是一个。然后第二个呢，就是说，学校也是这样觉得说，如果学生要创作出自己的特色的艺术，那其实是需要很多灵感的。那么大学会用各种各样的形式来尽量的给学生提供非常多的灵感的来源。那也包括我们那个耶鲁大学的展出也，这个艺术收藏跟展出也都包括文化类的，包括现代艺术，包括甚至这个平面设计，然后城市设计，他们有非常大的、空间非常大，然后材料非常齐全的工作室，其中招生官也非常那个骄傲的是也在说，耶鲁大学提供了大量的本科的艺术跟设计类的课程，超过有60门之多。那么任何的耶鲁本科的学生，他们都可以选择这些课程。也有招生官也有顺便说，一般来说，本科学生一个学期呢是修4到5门课，那么1年有2个学期，然后4年制。那学生呢可以选择一开始就定个决心，我要主修艺术。那么在头2年，他需要修大量的课程，他需要做很多的这个作品，然后他也需要去修一些其他感兴趣的课程。那么经过2年的这样子去打磨，如果还坚定我要继续走艺术之路的话，那么到第3年就可以去选择申请主修艺术。另外的话呢，就是不管招生官也说，艺术学生不管之后他想要在主修哪个方面的课程，比方说建筑，比方说纯艺，比方说这个设计或者是摄影等等，都会有一些基础课程需要学的。所以再次跟大家强调一下，就是说在申请本科类大学本科专业的时候，学生不是直接去申请艺术专业，而是你在申请的时候可以提供作品集，那么招生官也会邀请艺术系的教授们来给学生做作品的审核，也会这样子去帮助他们做一个是否录取学生的一个决定。大概就是这个样子。Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Eva. So this won't be the only opportunity to ask questions or learn more about Yale. These days, the websites have lots of information, including extensive information about the art programs and other programs, admissions, and so on. I'm not a big fan of the Yale Art Department website, but maybe those of you who are experts would think better of it. But in any case, in the remaining minutes, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank
I
you
see,
so much, Keith.
Absolutely. Hannah, do you want to guide this? I see some questions
Yeah.
in the chat.
Yeah, they're popping in. So someone here has written, if they finish 4 undergraduate studies, can students apply for architecture at Yale? I'm wondering maybe, yeah?
Absolutely. In fact, I think that's one of the appealing things in the modern way of the interdisciplinary nature, not just of universities, but the world. That Steve Jobs, who studied calligraphy and art at Reed College, went on into, as you all know, to make Apple computers what it is, partly because of the design. So anyway, the short answer is students who study art or other things, maybe even engineering as an undergraduate, can certainly apply to the School of Architecture at Yale, which is also well known, or any other program.
Sorry, let me quickly translate that too.
Oh yeah, I've got to remember that. Yes.
Yeah. 所以有听众在问说，如果学生完成了4年的本科学习在耶鲁，那么是否可以继续申请建筑的研究生？也是在耶鲁？答案是的。或者换一句话说，你的本科是任何专业都可以继续申请那个在耶鲁的建筑的研究生。这个是学校允许的。Thank you.
Absolutely.
Great. And so there's another one here that says if a student wants to declare an arts major, they could have art major in the undergraduate, or they have to have another major in liberal arts or science, and then arts as the minor or double major.
A very good question. And you may major in art. It doesn't have to be a secondary thing. I mean, we see art, and I mentioned computing in the arts and history of art. They are all major fields of study, and that usually takes a third or more of your course time, but then you can take as many classes as you want. So it doesn't have to be a secondary field. There may be students who decide to major in art and say psychology, or they major in psychology and take as many art courses as they want. So there are different configurations, but it doesn't have to be a secondary major. Yale and places like it often don't offer minors per se, because we don't want students to be boxed into scrambling to fulfill requirements in 2 different areas. But we allow students to create their own secondary areas of focus if they like. And there are some students who do fulfill degree requirements in 2 distinct fields. So there are different ways to approach that. Again, we want students to get a rigorous education, but have the flexibility.
Great. I have another question from the chat.
Sorry,
here that
Hannah.
says, sorry. They're piling in, so I go.
Yeah. So 刚刚有听众在问说，这个学生是不是一定要在本科就一定要说自己是不是艺术的主修，或者是说必须是主修文理科中的某一个，然后再所谓的选修这个艺术，或者是不是可以双修双主修？那么招生官的答案就是说，在耶鲁大学是可以在第3年的时候开始主修艺术的，当然也可以，比方说刚刚我们之前的那个例子，就是艺术跟心理课程，这个专业是可以合在一块儿，当然也可以是直接主修心理，但是呢，这个学生可以修很多他想要修的艺术课程，但是呢，想要提醒大家注意的地方是，耶鲁大学它不提供所谓的复修专业，它原因是学校不想学生就是把他们缩在一个把他们限制在一个盒子里面，但是学生可以有自己的自由去决定自己的第2专业或者是第2兴趣在哪，然后去修很多课程，这个是没有问题的。OK，thank you.
All right, so another question from the chat. How many years does it take to receive a master's of architecture?
The honest answer is that I'm not an expert on the architecture program in terms of length of time and so on. Master's programs tend to be a year or 2, not more than that. And then there are doctoral programs which take longer. But I would expect that the website would give you better information than me trying to make up that. So I know that's not very helpful, but it's easy to find out that information.
Great. And I have another, oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
It's okay. 有位听众在问说，建筑的研究生需要几年？刚刚招生官没有给出一个特别清晰的一个答案。当然可以，我们可以自己到网站上面去找到信息，或者之后联系我们奥马的工作人员也是可以的。谢谢。Thank you.
All right, so another question from the chat, and it's in regards to the website. It says that the Yale School of Art is a graduate school. Does that school also offer undergraduate programs?
Well, and that's, thanks for the question. And I know that it gets to be confusing, but it's not unusual for universities to have as part of the organization of the university, to have a dean and resources and programs that are dedicated to a particular area, like engineering. Yale has a school of engineering and a school of art, as you pointed out, a school of law. And it serves multiple purposes. The School of Law at Yale, for instance, is for graduate students who plan to be in the legal profession, but undergraduates get to take advantage of the presence of some courses that they can take and the lectures and so on. That the art school is even more fluid. It is a dedicated graduate program for master's and doctoral programs, but the faculty and the program and the resources are available to undergraduates as well. As I mentioned earlier, there are more than 60 courses offered through the art department, the School of Art, that are available to undergraduates, 60 studio art programs. So it gets a little bit confusing because in fact, one more point, and this may not help at all, but if you're interested in studying business at the University of Pennsylvania, say, or engineering at Columbia University. You actually apply specifically to those programs, even though you'll be part of the general undergraduate population. The nursing school at Columbia or Penn. But at Yale, you apply to Yale. You may be heading straight for a degree in art, and you can major in art as an undergraduate. And so without getting too complicated about it, Yale's School of Art is a famous place for research, graduate programs, but it also is a superb place to be an undergraduate studying art. It's just the fact that you would also include, as every other Yale undergraduate, courses in other areas. So you can major in art. I hope that helps a bit, but I understand that it's not completely unusual, but it can be confusing. But I'll leave it there. Eva, help.
Can you help me to understand this better? So is my understanding correct? So basically, first of all, when you apply to Yale, you apply to general program, not specific on any program at all. So just
right.
Undergrad. So if you graduate undergrad in Yale, in your certificate, that's University of Yale, and no faculty of something. Is that right?
No, and I want to make this clear. You do choose a department, but you have up to 2 years to decide. And in fact, there's another question in the chat where a student asked whether or not, if after being at Yale for a while, he or she decides, I love art, but I want to major in chemistry or physics or economics. And so we think it's sensible to allow students to change their minds or combine different areas. So students have up to 2 years to decide what their field is, but then they do fulfill in a specific department degree requirement. So it's not all general. It's just that you have flexibility.
Oh,
does that make sense?
Correct me if I'm
That's
wrong.
true at Harvard and Princeton as well. You apply to the university and you have time to choose your field rather than if you're applying to the United Kingdom, for instance, where you have to decide which faculty to which to apply. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll let you explain further, Eva, that I want to emphasize that students who are considering majoring in art or architecture or design often present, even as undergraduate applicants, portfolios that come to our office, but we ask our art department or architecture department to have a look at it and assess it. So we're very serious about art, even though there's that flexibility. And you would, if you pursue that, you graduate from Yale with a degree in art, an undergraduate degree in art.
OK， 我尝试着来解释一下这一个复杂的过程。首先第一呢，就是说，学生是在大三的时候，在耶鲁大三的时候来确定专业的。简单一点讲是你可以确定你的专业主修专业是艺术应该这样理解是没有问题的。当然你也可以确定你的主修是其他什么专业，但是你可以选很多艺术的课程，这个也都是没有问题的。Yeah, thank you, Keith.
Great. So someone in the chats mentioned that there is a really good Bachelor of Arts, Masters of Music program at Yale, and it does look like you've added a link to that website in the chat, Keith. Is there anything else that you want to mention about that?
The reason I went straight to the link is that it's a program for students who are very interested and committed to music, and this allows them to apply while they're applying for their first year at Yale to be admitted to this combined master's program. But students can also apply to that while they're undergraduate. So it's something where we want to give students, just as I've not expertly, but tried to explain that students are very serious about art, or in this case, serious about music. There are avenues where they can continue their studies at Yale in the graduate degree programs, or simply as undergraduate. So all I can say is that the BA master's program in music is for students who, similar to someone you may have heard about, Yo-Yo Ma. During my time at Harvard, I remember hearing him talk with some visitors casually about why he chose to study at Harvard rather than any music conservatory in the world would have been delighted to have him. But he knew even before he arrived that a liberal arts education would not only be fulfilling for him personally, but as he can describe, help his art, help his music. So we try to provide as many avenues for very serious musicians, very serious artists and future architects, and for that matter, future doctors and lawyers and so on. So this is just one other way, the master's program combined with the bachelor's program in music, where students can be confident of participating in that program throughout their Yale career.
Sorry, Hannah, can you repeat the question again?
Sure. So the question was just if Keith could elaborate a little bit more about the Bachelor's of Art Music Master's program.
OK，所以刚刚的问题是说，可不可以请招生官解释多一点，说本科的艺术或者是研究生的音乐，应该是都可以的。Keith, did you say that the students is okay to do both? Like they have the option to do it?
Well, yes, you apply to do as you're applying for your first year, you can apply to be part of the combined bachelor's master's program.
OK， 所以刚刚招生官说，你在本科申请的时候，其实就可以直接申请所谓的硕本研读谢谢 ，Thank you.
Sure.
Great. We have a couple more questions in the chat. One came to me via direct message, and it says for a 2022 application, the SAT is optional for high school to take advanced placement courses. Do you have any advice, like if there's a minimum advanced placement courses that a high school student would need to take that would potentially benefit their application? Or if there's no advanced placement score, is it possible to be a student accepted by Yale?
It's a great question. And one thing I'll say, and I alluded to it earlier, and that is that admissions at places like Yale and Princeton and so on is much more holistic, meaning that we look at a variety of different bits of information and background, and we value students writing about their interests and experiences and so on, so that we're looking for students and their curiosity, not just a set of credentials. And we've always asked for student records of the courses they've chosen, the type of curriculum they've experienced. The SATs and ACT have always been useful as just another piece of information for us. We see brilliant academic students who don't do spectacularly well on the SAT or ACT. But that's not what we care about. It's the combination of things. We ask for that information ordinarily because it helps keep a balance. It's the easiest example. If a student is doing well in mathematics and does well on the SAT mathematics part, it means things are lining up appropriately. If a student does very well on the SAT math, but not so well in the classroom in math, it either means that the classroom teaching is very tough and the grading is tough, or that a student may have the capability, but maybe not be putting as much energy into it. So that's the way we've used testing anyway. It's not, the SAT and ACT is not the same thing as a leaving exam or the grades that you get week to week, month to month, year to year in school. The advanced placement tests or international baccalaureate tests do, in an imperfect way, measure what you've been learning as opposed to your general aptitude, which again is what the SAT and ACT do. But I wanted to explain that because the fact that the SAT is optional has to do with the fact that the plague has made it difficult for students to have access to those tests, or with online learning in many circumstances. We just, like many other US institutions, felt it was unfair to ask students to go to that trouble as well. In the end, students who have good grades, mostly A's, mostly 90s, whatever the standard is in your school, your area, and good examples of external testing, 4s and 5s on APs, 6s and 7s in the IB program. It would be generally 700s in the SAT and the 30s in the ACT. But I want to stress that we don't even secretly have cutoffs or expectations or thresholds. Like I said before, we see very talented students whose exam results aren't top. In fact, we turn down students who have perfect SATs, not because we don't think they're capable, but because once we know you are capable, we're looking at other factors. I'll bet you, Eva, you'll be able to simplify that, but to reassure students and families that even at the famous schools that can admit very many students, we're not just looking at a grade average or SATs, which again are optional. By the way, if you take them and you feel you took the test and thought, I could have done better on this, I feel if I tried it one more time, I'd do better, then by all means do that. But do understand that we use the tests not as a way to keep students out. It's more of an additional bit of information that helps us make good decisions.
Okay, I try. Thank you.
I know you can do it, Eva.
Thank you. 刚刚有听众在问说，2022年的申请，这个 SAT 跟 ACT 标准化考试是属于 optional， 那就是说学生可以选择递交或者选择不递交。包括也在问说 AP， 这样子的其实是相当于大学大一课程的这一些课程，对于申请的时候是否有一些帮助？招生官总的来说呢，他是说第一个，他们在做审核的时候其实是看一个全面的一个学生的一个情况，他们希望看到的是学生的好奇心，而不是说一个完美的一个成绩单。另外的话呢，他们也会要看到学生的这一个历年的这样子的一个学习课程的一个记录，并且是他希望看到的是一个一致性。什么意思呢？比方说，这个学生的学校的数学成绩就很棒。 上，再加上一个非常高的标准化考试 ICT 的数学成绩啊，那就是那招生官就会觉得说这样子的学生其实是不错的，但是如果要是学校的成绩不是那么理想，但是有一个比方说 ICT 数学800分满分，那招生官心里可能他们就会想说，是不是这个学校的数学教的就是比较难，或者是说这个学生的这一个数学的这一个学习能力并没有一致或者匹配，但是不管怎么说，一般来说，好的成绩一定是必要的。这个是让招生官可以看到学生的一个态度，以学习能力跟一个态度。那么比方说，AP 的话最好是有4分或者5分啊，满分是5分。那么如果是 IB 的话呢，最好有一个平均的一个6分或者7分啊。然后 ICT 的，因为 ICT 是考的是数学跟英文嘛，都能有700多分啊。2科都能有700多分以上，但是招生官也有在强调一件事情，就是说，他们没有所谓的 cut off line， 意思就是说你的分数低于多少就一定不会是看你的申请，不是的，他希望大家能够理解的是说，其实，也是有很多有才能的学生，他们的标准化考试可能并不尽如人意，但是他们也会收，那么他们也聚过很多就是有完美成绩的学生，所以这个还是一个综合考量的一个选择跟一个考察。Thank you.
Great, thank you. I just want to point out before I get to one more question that Keith has been kind enough to leave his email address here in the chat, as well as a link to the general admissions website. It looks like he's also been answering an email, answering a question in the chat regarding if you decide you want to change your major, if you like science better, is there anything you can do? And Keith has basically said that you can change it really easily, and you've got 2 years to decide what your major is. So the last question that we have here in the chat right now is, if you submit an art portfolio via Slide Room, do you have to do anything to link it to your common application?
Yes, but it's sort of automatic. In other words, if you use the common application platform, the instructions for how to send supplementary materials will not you'll find information as you apply, but also on the Yale website about supplemental materials, which discusses Slide Room and how to send that along. So that's a relatively easy process to send supplements. But let me see if I could find the link to the Yale supplements, and I'll put it in the chat. Here we go. So it's a relatively simple process. Not that technology always works, but we haven't had any trouble in the past where students either send musical recordings or portfolios of their artwork and so on. And other schools have similar approaches to that. So, and that's something, by the way, even if you're not sure that you would want to ultimately major in art, if you're talented in that area, you're welcome to use the supplementary option to show us your talent. So we don't make it, I know it might be confusing, but we don't make admissions decisions based on whether or not you will be a good historian or architect. we base our decisions on your general talents and interests. And if you have special talents in areas, we take that into account. But you can take courses, get advice from deans and others and say, yes, I'm going to take classes in arts right from the very first semester. I may change my mind and major in linguistics or French language or global affairs later, but I'm going to take some courses in art, I'm going to take some courses in mathematics, in language in my first term. In my second term, I'm going to take more art, and I hope you're getting the idea. And you're probably ready for an evening meal and some rest. But I'm glad I had the chance to give you a sense of Yale.
Thank you, Keith. Give me a few minutes as well.
Sure.
提醒大家，招生官呢把他的联系方式，然后一些学校的招生方面的链接，包括有几位听众的问题，Keith 呢招生官都直接在 chat 里面有回复大家，在聊天的这个里面回复大家，所以大家可以去看一看。有几件事情想跟大家做一个翻译。第一个呢就是说，如果你一开始进去第一年我就决定我要学艺术，可不可以？可以，你第一年就可以修很多艺术课，只是 keep in mind， 就是那个时候你并没有在宣布你是在主修艺术，只是你可以在第一年开始就修很多艺术课。那么等学着之后，我突然改变了我的主意，我对其他的一个比方说我对数学感兴趣了，我对心理感兴趣了，那么我可不可以去转修其他的课程呢？可以，没问题。记住，你在耶鲁你有2年的时间可以去尝试，可以去体验，可以去学习。那么第二个呢，就是说在申请这个在做申请的时候有一个 slide room， 这个呢是用来学生去上传他的艺术级作品的。那么是不是会直接链接到申请的 Common App 的这个平台呢？答案是是的，基本上是一个自动的。那么这么多年下来也没有太碰到什么技术问题，这个是另外一个。然后呢，招生官也非常强调一个点，就是鼓励大家，不管你申请什么专业你在申请耶鲁的时候，如果你想尽量用好补充材料这个部分。补充材料是用来展示你的天赋、你的才能和你的兴趣的。那么他们在耶鲁的招生官在招生的时候，在考量的时候，也是考量学生的一个整体的，他也会考量你有什么兴趣，你有什么天赋，你有什么才能让他能够就是录取你。所以这个是请大家要可以放在心上的。Thank you.
Great. Awesome. This is our last call on if there's any more questions for Keith. If there are any that you think of later, you can definitely send it over to us at AOMA, and I can always forward them to Keith as well.
如果大家还有什么其他问题的话呢，欢迎大家随时联系奥马的工作人员我们也会帮您做一些research， 也会帮您来联系招生官，做更加进一步的审核跟建议。谢谢。Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Keith, for your presentation and answering all of our questions. It's super informative for our students and our parents, and they're all really excited to learn more about Yale. So we really appreciate it.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me, Hannah, and you too, Eva.
Thank you, Keith. It's good to meet you.
Great.
Same
Thank
here.
you.
Yeah, have a wonderful evening. Thank you.